Ну что, слышно меня правильно? Раз, раз. Слышно меня правильно?
А если
Раз,
так?
раз. Слышно меня правильно?
А если
Раз,
так?
раз. Слышно меня правильно? В общем, да. М, С этим прекрасным языком я знаком а, довольно-таки давно, но знаком я был, скажем так. Я его закинул тогда, когда у меня закинулся курс, то есть в унике. Я его закинул и больше никогда им не пользовался. Следовательно, я полностью его забыл. I forgot about everything about this. Well, uh, and because I forgot about everything about this, I want to go from the beginning. I want to go from the beginning. I was more focused on JavaScript and web technologies. Now I want to go from the beginning. Well, and so we continue. So I have already surpassed some of the most recent things, uh, like introduction to these things, etc. So we will start from here because I have already passed these 6 months. I will be doing things in VS Code, not in VS Studio, because I feel like VS Code is my thing and VS Studio is very heavy, no matter what hardware you have. VS Studio is very heavy. I have already configured this extension to work with. I have already installed these things like MSys, the distribution of packages of portable Linux programs. So I could port things like G++, compile things like GDB in order to debug when I need. I have updated them to the latest version I could. So the only thing I haven't done yet is I haven't made that we can uh, create this terminal like right there. We can't create this terminal from here. But thing is, let's open some folder where we'll work. Um, let's take this one. This JSON file we use to tell our IntelliSense what we're doing. This JSON file is I don't really get what it is for, but I think this is for build. This is for build when we use build like right here. VS Code build thing. But I will build through console, so I don't really bother about these files. No, this is very good, but I don't really bother about this or this yet. I might be bothering in future. Um, I have already, this is what I have been doing like the previous year, but I haven't really gotten that much ahead, as you can see. I stopped somewhere in the types variables. I've tried to remember what I have known like in 2019 about this language, 2020, but I couldn't because I haven't really paid much attention in my studies. Um, but now I understand that I need this language to continue. So having this understood, I will. Uh, we, we shall start probably. I won't take much time today because today is As you can see, I have one in the morning. Maybe 1/2 hours we will just figure out, maybe finish a chapter or two. Uh, finish a chapter or two, yes. As you can see, I can compile like G++, uh, like this. As you can see, I have compiled, so my compiler is already set up. This is okay. Mm, I can do to write this program assign an idea. We typically start by creating a project. The project is a container that holds all of your source files, images, data files, etc. that are needed to produce an executable or a library, website, etc. The project also saves various IDE. Project also saves various IDE, compiler, and linker settings, as well as remembering where you left off. So what when you reopen the project later, the state of the IDE can be restored to wherever you left off. When you choose to compile your program, all of the CPP files in the project will get compiled and linked. Each project corresponds to one program. When you're ready to create a second program, you either need to create a new project or override the code in the existing project, if you don't want to keep it. Project files are generally IDE specific. Ну, то есть проекты, они привязаны к IDE-шкам. So a project created for one IDE will need to be recreated in a different IDE. Create a new project for each program you write. Ну или в моем случае create a new folder for each project I do, etc. Console projects. When you create a new project, you'll generally be asked what type of project you want to create. This is for ideas like Visual Studio, but not in our case. All projects that we create in this tutorial will be console projects. A console project means that we are going to create programs that can be run from Windows, Linux, or macOS. Here's a screenshot of the Windows console. As far as I'm concerned, this website is platform agnostic. All the examples and learning things it shows mostly cover platform agnostic things. By default, console applications have no graphical GUI. They print text to the console, read input from the keyboard, and are compiled into standalone executable files. This is perfect for Learning C++ because it keeps the complexity to a minimum, ensures things work on a wide variety of systems. Don't worry if you never used a console before or don't know how to access it. You compile and launch programs through IDE. Ну, в моєму принципі, випадку це не грає ролі. When you create a new project and program, many IDEs will automatically add a project to a workspace or solution, причому varies by IDE. A project workspace or solution is a container that can hold one or more related projects. For example, if you are writing a game and want to have a separate executable for single player and multiplayer, you need to create two projects. It would make sense. It wouldn't make sense for both of these projects to be completely independent. After all, they are part of the same game. Most likely, each would be configured as a separate project with a single workspace solution. Although you can add multiple projects to a single solution, we generally recommend creating a new workspace or solution for each program. Especially while learning. It's simpler and there's less chance of something going on. Ну, об этом вообще можно не задумываться в моем случае. Writing your first program. Traditionally, this program is right, and you launch into the Hello World program, and we aren't going to deprive you of this experience. You thank us later. В принципі, я це вже зробив. I have already done this. This is easy. I'm just keeping remembering stuff like I'm going to until the point I won't be able to remember and I will start actually learning. This is an example of using Visual Studio. Type is set to console application.exe. And некоторые precompiled header еще есть. Но у меня как бы нет не precompiled. I have no precompiled headers because I don't have Visual Studio. Because I don't use it. You now created a project, jump down to the Visual Studio Solution Explorer. What are precompiled headers and why are we turning them off? In large projects, those with many code files, precompiled headers can improve compilation speed by avoiding some redundant compilation that tends to occur in larger projects. However, precompiled headers require extra work to use. And for small projects, such as those you'll create in your tutorials, make little to no difference in compilation times. For this reason, we recommend turning precompiled headers off initially, and only enabling them later if and when you find your compilation times suffering. Creating the project. Так, ну тут понятно. Це мене все не цікавить. On the left or right side of window, we should see Windows Solution inside the window, Visual Studio, blah blah blah. In the editor, you see that Visual Studio has already opened Hello World CVP and created some code for you. Select and delete all the code and type copy the following into. Ну, тобто тут вже є якісь коментарі, щось тут напихано. Просто видаляємо, вставляємо чистий код. От, це я, в принципі, вже зробив. To compile the program, either press F7, or go to Build menu, or зробити так. І давай ще раз перевіримо, чи в мене правильна версія. Да, все верно, 14.2.0. Угу. This means your compile was successful. I got error. Так. Start as our debugging. When you run a program directly from Visual Studio, you may see an additional line of output that looks something like this. Так, про CodeBlocks я взагалі скіпну це все діло. О, тут ще був, до речі, мій. Ладно. To start project, go to the View Explorer menu. This will open Explorer pane. If you haven't previously opened a project, you should see an Open Folder button. If there is already an open project and you want to start a new one, just File Open Folder from the tab now. Inside the dialog opens, create a new folder named Hello World, and then select this folder. This folder will be your project folder. Давайте ми... Це діло, конечно, класно. Але давайте ми створимо ще один window. Another window. Open some folder. Um, and something like this. Let's go like this. Ну, тут навіть якщо ви юзаєте G++ on the command line, ми просто робимо наступним чином. We just create something like або main. Ну, давай hello world CP, окей. Я так розумію, стиль коду, от саме CP-шників, він якби the code style in JavaScript is looking like this. So you write function name, and then like this. This is normal. As I can see in C++, I need to do something like this. I have been doing like this in university, but then I switched to this one code style. So I'll try switching to this one. I'll try my best. Okay. And then we just do it like this. We just use uh, or we can just use the O flag. Say we just want to name it like this and select the CPP file in the end. Well, we haven't even said what exact um, standard we want, etc., etc. It doesn't matter right now. We are just oi, what have I done? It doesn't matter right now very much. This will compile and link around all possible. If you're using an editor or error web, no, okay, идем дальше. If compiling fails, it's okay. First look at the error message compile give you. Most often you contain a line and you get an image there. Examine both the line and lines around it. Make sure there are no types or misspellings. Make sure you're not including line numbers. Second, look at QA lesson. If you command as user, thought read commands below. Finally, if okay. If your program runs but the console window flashes and closes, це проблема з IDE-шкою. Це проблема з IDE-шкою, це таке. IDE problems like Visual Studio. Visual Studio bullshit. I'll skip this. If you're using antivirus or anti-malware, consider excluding your project directory from the scans. As compiling and debugging may cause false positives. They say antivirus might block my code sometimes from compiling or from executing, I don't know, or from debugging. Hmm. What's the difference between the compile, build, rebuild, clean, and run and start options? Так, оце важливо. Ну, із того, що я знаю, compile — це процес, is the process of compile is done by compiler program, which uh, which takes as a CPP files as an input and provides object files, which consist of machine code, translated machine code, and sometimes assembly code if needed, but mostly just object files with machine code. Uh, well, this is all the compiler does, and besides translation, it also optimizes, does some analysis, optimization, syntax checking, etc. Build is a full process, not only compiling. Besides compiling, we can also linking. Yes, the linking is also part of building. Packaging is also part of build, like transforming the, the linked files into executable file or into a library file if you're doing not an executable. If you are building not an executable, then what is rebuild? Rebuild is like mm, I don't really get what it is right now and what is clean. Uh, run slash start is like execute, maybe just execute. This is what I do after build, like like this. This is run. I know there is a tool called make or maybe build. There is some tool on Unix when I was on Unix. There was a tool that allowed me to pre-configure my GCC, my GDB, my linker, pre-configure everything in a way that allowed me to just write build or make, and my files all got built and then finally executed. But I forgot how. I forgot the exact way. When a code file is compiled, you ID my cache. When a code file is compiled, your IDE my cache save the resulting object file on disk. Закешує цей resulting object файл на диску. Це в результаті компіляції відбудеться, правильно? A cache, pronounced like cache, is storage location where frequently accessed data is stored for fast retrieval later. That way, if the program is compiled again in the future, any code file that hasn't been modified doesn't need to be recompiled. Ну, логічно, якщо у нас частина коду оця ніяк не змінилася, то і перекомпільовувати його в машинний код не потрібно. Тобто ще раз проходитися по файлу. No sense, because we have already cached and it wasn't modified. And then from last time and can be just reused rather than having to be regenerated. This can speed up um, compilation times significantly at the cost of a little bit of disk space. This is fair enough. With what in mind, here's what each of the options typically does. Build compiles all modified code. This is a little bit more further into topic, like considering we are already working or we have already built something, right? Uh, the build process compiles all modified code files in the project or workspace solution. and then links the object files into an executable. Ну, тобто build — це весь процес. Це compiling, plus linking, plus packaging. Packaging of object files into executable. If no code files have been modified since the last build, this option just does nothing. If anything has changed, but we are starting another build, then this option just does nothing. Clean removes all cached objects and executables. Removes all cached objects and executables. So the next time the project is built, all files will be recompiled and the new executable produced. So clean is a process of removing both cache and executables. By cache, I mean object machine code files, and by executables, I mean these files like this .exe. I haven't I haven't even created object files like manually. I have just skipped this and linked them right away by using this flag hyphen o. But okay, rebuild does a clean followed by a build. Um, Compile, rebuild does a clean followed by a build. If clean just removes our cached object files and executables, then rebuild is doing both clean and then build. Okay, this is understandable. Compiler recompiles a single code file regardless of whether it has been cached previously. Процесс компиляції перекомпільовує recompiles a single code file regardless of whether it has been cached. The build process considers previous cache, like it only modifies code files usually. It is configured in a way that considers modifiability of files, while compilation usually just compiles files, like no matter what. It has a file, it has a purpose, it compiles. Um, it would be a little bit strange if you have a compiler, we want it to compile or recompile, uh, but it says no, it already in cache, I don't want to compile. This is uh, this is just unrealistic and unhappy. A build I can understand. This is some build pipeline for us, but compile, no. This does not invoke the linker or produce an executable. When you already compile, I mean only compile, you don't even link object files and you don't even produce executable. So you only compile, only translate and optimize and analyze the file into object like this. So when we say compile, we mean compile. We don't mean link, we don't mean package, etc. Run start. Executes executable from a prior build. Some IDEs will invoke a build before doing a run to ensure you're running the latest version of your code. Otherwise, we'll just execute the prior executable. Ну, тобто, наприклад, Visual Studio will do rebuild every time you click the run button, just to be sure. This is not a very good thing to do, especially when a program is really big and every time rebuild when you just want to run the previous version is not very clever. Although we talk informally about compiling our programs, to actually compile our programs, we will typically choose the build option, in the run. When we say compile informally, то есть, в неформальной обстановке слово compile может быть синонимом is synonym of the word building. But in formal terms, compile is not building. This is an Roger that. Conclusion. Congratulations, you made it through hardest part, blah blah blah. Compiling an idea. Don't worry if you blah, blah, if you use few common C++ programs. Uh, I'm grateful that he even did in this lesson. The author have even considered the possibility that we might uh, use G++ from the console, and we also use VS Code. I'm grateful that I hope he's going to continue this practice. A few common C++ programs. In this section, we'll add some of the common issues that new programmers seem to run across the fairly high probability. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list of compilation or execution programs, but rather a pragmatic list of solutions to very basic issues. No, something that level of basic that it can be put in a list like this, like there. If you have any suggestions for other issues that might be added to this list, post them in the comment section. General runtime issues, тобто issues during the runtime of our program. When executing a program, the console window blinks and then closes. This is not our case. I ran my program and get a window but no output. This is not our case. My program compiles but it isn't working correctly. What do I do? Debug it. There are tips on how to diagnose and debugging later in chapter 3. В третій главі ми будемо розбиратися з дебагінгом. Угу. Як користуватися GDB. How to use GDB. General compile time issues. Проблеми під час виконання. Problems during проблеми під час компіляції. Compile time. When I compile my program, I get an error about unresolved, невирішений, або не знайдений, да? Невирішений, не знайдений. External symbol. External symbol main or win main 16. This means your compiler can't find your main function. Тобто буквально не смог знайти main. А я так розумію, вхідна точка нашого компілятора це завжди він шукає оцей main в файлі. Якщо він заходить в файл і починає його аналізувати, то завжди він починає його аналізувати із оцієї відправної точки. І виникають проблеми, коли компайлер can't find this thing. There are a few things to check. Does the code include a function named main? Is main spelled correctly? When you compile a program, do you see the file contains function main get compiled? Uh, this means that if you have a lot of files like ACPP, BCPP, CCPP, and our main is in DCPP, just to make sure that we include DCPP in our compiler, just not to forget include the file with main. If not, easy, move the main function to one that is, or add the file to your project. In second chapter, 8 lesson, we learn about programs with multiple files. Okay. Did you create a console project? Try creating a new console project. There might be some differences in compiler behavior when it is set up to compile a console project or some other project, but I don't really uh, targeting targeting program type. I mean, set up for our compiler, it may differ the behavior of searching the main function. When I compile the program, I get an error that main is already defined, or about multiple definitions of main. A C++ program is only allowed to have a single function named main. Well, this should be a single function. Has to be a single function, or otherwise compiler just won't compile. Your C++ program has more than one. Examine the files in your program. Well, I'm trying to use 11, 14, 17 XX functionality, and it doesn't work. If your compiler is old, it may not support these recent additions. In that case, just upgrade compiler. For modern IDE's compilers, your compiler might be defaulting to an older language standard. We cover how to change your language standard. Configuring compiler. So, for example, if we look at the releases and take some old release from 12.12, it is obvious that this release won't support the compilation of C++ of some kind of like above 2012 version. It is just obvious. If you want to compile no a new C++, then you have to also obtain the new compiler like this. When I compile my program error that is cannot open. When I compile my program, I get an error that it cannot open the exe for writing. Mhm. This means the linker is trying to create your executable, but it can't. This can happen for quite a few reasons. Most commonly, exe is currently running. A running executable can't be replaced while it is running. This is when the name for executable we are creating right now uh, is overriding the executable that we have already created, and it had the same name. Your antivirus and malware protection is preventing the executable from being created. This is antivirus problems. The exe already exists, and it currently locked for some other reason. We somehow locked, when we somehow accidentally or not accidentally locked the exe file from changing, from writing via some operating system tools, I guess. This is just some Visual Studio type problem again. I don't think I'll encounter this problem. Not for now, at least. When trying to use scene, cout, or handle, the compiler says scene, cout, or handle is an undeclared identifier. Means something like it can't find, compiler can't find the definitions you provided. Make sure you have included the following line near the top. Include iostream. Тобто включити якусь бібліотеку. Вот. Second, make sure lines like this are going to be mostly are going to be linked the when the linker time. So first make sure you have included the following. Second, make sure each use of scene, cout, and handle are prefixed by std, like this. Mhm. If it doesn't fix your issue, then it may be that your compiler is out of date or the install is corrupted. Try reinstall and upgrade the latest version of compiler. This is a this is a classic uh, undeclared slash unresolved slash unfound identifier, where identifier is just some some keyword, some word we use to reference to something like cout. We reference for cout. What is cout? If we haven't explained our compiler what is cout, it doesn't find it. So we have to explain that we are including this library or this header file. We'll figure out this later. When trying to use handle to end a printed line, the compiler says end1 is an undeclared. Uh, this is some character problems like when you accidentally not write endl like end line and write end1. This is understandable. Visual Studio issues. Well, I'll just skip this. Something else? I don't have anything against Visual Studio. I just don't use it, so I don't need it, right? Something else. I have some other problem that I can figure out how can I answer quickly. As you progress through material, you'll undoubtedly have questions or run into unexpected problems. What do you, uh, what to do next? In general, there are a few things. First, ask a search engine. Find a good way to phrase a question and do a search. This I can do. This is not that easy, that hard, I mean. If you're searching an error message, paste it in an exact error message using quotes. Odds are someone has already asked the same question and there is an answer waiting for it. Quotes just make it so we are looking for exact match, exact textual match. Second, ask an AI. Start a question in C++. Get a C++ specific answer. Some ideas for things. An explanation of some concept. In C++, what is local variable? The difference between two things. In C++, what is the difference between a pointer and a reference? Demonstration of a concept. In C++, write a short program that adds two numbers. Note that AIs may return inaccurate or outdated information, and programs they write will probably not follow modern best practices. In above files asked on a QA board. Якщо нічого не допомогло, nothing helped, we go and ask on some forum or QA board. There are websites designed for creating questions, Stack Overflow, etc. This I all am aware of. Well, this is a cool thing. The lesson is not, as I can see, is not that big, but I know that the topic of configuring compiler and doing build configuration is very big, and even some instruments are dedicated to this topic, like make or cmake. Uh, but the article itself is not that big. Maybe I should be grateful. A build configuration. Конфигурация нашего билда, also called build target. Ну, ця назва мені не дуже подобається. I don't really like this title. I like build configuration. Is a collection of project settings that determines how your IDE will build a project. Логично, logical. The build configuration typically includes things like what the executable will be named, what directories the IDE will look in, what are the code and library files, які директорії треба заглянути для іншого коду або library файлів. Ну, тобто, які ми, в принципі, компілятор, ну, які ми, в принципі, директорії дивимося. Що ми в пошуках object файлів, наприклад, да, або CPP-шних файлів, якщо ми говоримо про компайлер, або object файлів, якщо ми говоримо про лінкер, які ми місця проходимо в пошуках цих файлів, що ми затрагуємо. Whether to keep or strip out debug information. How much? How much to have the compiler optimize your program? Ну, наскільки оптимізувати програму, etc. Generally, you will want to leave these settings at their default values unless you have a specific reason to change something. When you create a new project in IDE, most IDEs will set up two different build configurations for you. Значить, у нас повинно бути, ну, або загальному практика ідешок, да, великих, така, що we have two different build configurations, a release configuration and a debug configuration. They was considering the build process. The debug configuration is designed to help you debug a program, and is generally the one you will use when writing your programs. Или dev, якщо б ми говорили про JavaScript, то це б називалося не debug, а dev configuration, something like this. This configuration turns off all optimizations. We are not optimizing, so we are building faster, right? And includes debugging information, which makes your programs larger and slower, but much easier to debug. The debug configuration is usually selected as the active configuration by default. We'll talk more about debugging techniques in a later lesson. The release configuration is designed to be used when releasing your program to the public. We have finished our work and job 99% of the time with debug. Only then we switch to another build configuration called release when releasing a program to the public. This version is typically optimized for size and performance and doesn't contain the extra debugging information. Because it does not need this information debugging. We as developers need this information. The end user does not need this information at all. And the end user needs not fast start. Well, you also may need fast start, but more importantly, we should optimize for size and performance. Because the release configuration includes optimizations, this mode is also useful for testing the performance of your code, which will show how how to do later in it. When we want to actually test the performance of our code, we should switch to release configuration, build in release configuration, and run in release configuration like this. But if we are testing not for performance but for some issues we encountered, then we definitely want debug configuration. Well, when the Hello World program for lesson 7 was built using Visual Studio, the executable produced in the debug configuration was 65 kilobytes. And we have been using in Visual Studio uh, an unoptimized way of building, whereas the executable built in the release version was 12 kilobytes. The difference is largely due to an extra debugging information kept in the debug build. Although you can create your own custom build configurations. Тобто ми можемо створити свої кастомні build конфігурації. You'll rarely have a reason to, unless you really want to compare two builds made using different compiler settings. So imagine we have a compiler. Compiler has a way to compile, or maybe linker has a way to link, and we want to experiment with it. We want to watch how may vary in performance or size the executable we package in the end using different compiler settings, or maybe not only compiler. Uh, then in this case, we might be feeling the need to create custom build configurations. Best practice. Use the debug build configuration when developing. When ready to release or want to test performance, use release build configuration. Well, this is pretty logic. Just don't forget that when you want to test performance, you need to do a release build and not remain in the debug build. We need to remember this one. This has to be remembered. Craved in our memory. Some IDEs, Visual Studio also creates separate build configuration for different platforms. For example, Visual Studio creates build configuration for both 32 and 64-bit platforms. Switching between build configuration. Well, Visual Studio just has this little thing right here. For blocks, also build target has. Well, for GCC and Clang. GCC це компайлер на базі Unix. Clang це компайлер, який ми дістали з Mac, правильно? Mac Native Compiler, а GCC це Unix Native Compiler. Якщо загуглити Clang, то ми побачимо, що він, що створили його Apple. Тобто це просто інший компайлер. Another compiler, which is PSD ліцензія. Okay. For GCC and Clang users, um, add ggdb to the command line for debug builds and 02 dn debug for release builds. This is just some flags we put. Use the debug build options for now. For GCC and Clang, the -o option is used to control optimization settings. The most common options are as follows. O0 recommended optimization level for debug builds as it disables optimization. This is the default setting. The default setting is no no optimization at all. So we are working in uh, debug environment. We are compiling in debug way. 0.2 is the recommended optimization level of release builds as it applies optimizations that should be beneficial for all programs. 0.3 adds additional optimizations that may or may not perform better than 0.02 depending on the specific program. Once the program is written, you can try compiling your release build with 0.3 instead of 0.2 and measure to see which is faster. So it might happen like this. So we have done optimizations using O3 and figure out that our program is not that much optimized as one which was generated using O2. But sometimes it is going to be this way. VS Code users. Well, I am both VS Code user and C Clang user, but okay. When you first run your program, a new file called task.json was created under the VS Code folder in the Explorer pane. Open the task.json file and find args, and then locate the line file within that section. Ну, аргументи, грубо кажучи. Tasks, взагалі оцей файл tasks, який у мене згенерувався після того, як я отут клікав на run. Оцей от файлик. Це взагалі файлик необхідний. It has to be if you want to firstly, if you want to use like integrated IDE way to debug a build. What if you want, then you write this file where you explain things like GCC arguments like this. Maybe this is the way I need to configure. I just don't really want to spend much time in console, but it feels so natural and so lightweight when you just use your console to uh, do things and not use proprietary things with VS Code. But you can pass in your arguments uh, such command one per line. When debugging, just gdb, and when releasing, two of these flags. Okay, this is just switching of build configurations, modifying build configurations. In the next few lessons, we'll show you how to tweak some settings in your build configurations. Whenever changing a project setting, we recommend making. So this whole article just talks about the thing like the phenomenon of build configurations. So build configuration is just some mm, high level high level abstraction of build settings, like some big general things like now, for example, arguments of the compiler. But there are a lot of more specific things you can, uh, for example, the standard you use when compiling C++. There's no a word about how to change the standard or how to look up the standard. But this is just not a part of build configuration. And I also don't really know what is this and what is this. So, compiler extensions, configuring a compiler. This is just a more, this is just a little bit further than an overall build configuration, which mostly considers only the optimization level you do, mm, the level of optimization. So, the more level optimizations, the longer the compilation time, and the less optimizations, the less compilation time. This is understandable. So this is why we prefer, as developers, we prefer the debug mode for it to be faster. And if we just want to test our performance, we do a production build. Так, this is okay. Let's continue. I think I will stop in half an hour because I feel like my concentration is going off. Uh, we haven't really touched C++, but we have a little bit. We have almost completed the introduction, chapter 0. Well, um, what do we have here? The C++ standard defines rules about how programs should behave in specific circumstances. And in most cases, compilers will follow these rules. Well, the C++ creates rules, compiler follows these rules. However, many compilers implement their own changes to the language. Many compilers implement their own changes to the language, often to enhance compatibility with other versions of the language, e.g. C99, or for historical reasons. What does it mean? Compilers and their own changes. Hmm. These compiler-specific behaviors are called compiler extensions. These compiler-specific behaviors are called compiler extensions. Writing a program that makes use of a compiler extension allows you to write programs that are incompatible with the C++ standard. Mhm. Programs using non-standard extensions generally will not compile on other compilers that don't support the same extensions. Or if they do, they may not run correctly. Ну, тобто, якщо ми використовуємо якийсь виключно функціонал доступний ну, екстеншн, да, доступний нашому компайлеру, да, це означає, що ми і скомпілювати зможемо так, як ми це робимо, да, лише використовуючи цей компайлер конкретний. Frustratingly, compiler extensions are often enabled by default, включены по умолчанию. This is particularly damaging for new learners who may think some behavior that works in part of official C++ standard, when in fact their compiler is simply over-permissive. А, this is particularly damaging. Это особенно плохо, когда люди, начиная использовать компайлер экстеншены, начинают путать. Да? Они начинают думать, что то, что они видят, то, как работают эти экстеншены, что они добавляют, this behavior работает так всегда, так везде, да, то есть является частью стандарта. When in fact the compiler is simply over-permissive. Because compiler extensions are never necessary and cause the programs to be non-compliant with C++ standards, we recommend turning extensions off. So extensions is not about the flags we use when we run. No, no, no. This is another story. Some compilers implement their own extensions, and by doing so, if you prefer to use these extensions, then from this moment, when compiling a code, you are not using the standard C++. You are using C++ non-standard with your compiler, your preferred compiler tweaks. This is what I get from this whole section. Best practice. Disable compiler extensions to ensure your programs and coding practices remain compliant with C++ standard. Ну, best practice просто не використовувати ці екстеншени. Це як задізейблити в тут. You can disable compiler extensions by adding the pedantic errors flag for the compile command line. Угу. А якщо я цього не зроблю, this is a little when adding pedantic errors flag to GCC, you also disable the compiler extensions, things which are only compiler and create our and make our as non-standard. For VS Code users, open the task.json, find args, и додайте pedantic errors. As at the time of writing, VS Code does not automatically add the new line to the end of code files that are missing it. Sometimes that is pedantically required by this standard. Fortunately, we can tell VS Code to do so. We go to File, Preference, Settings, open dialog, insert final new line into the search bar. In both workspace settings and user settings tabs, ensure the checkbox labeled files insert final new line is checked. Давай перевіримо, чи у нас це є. File, Preferences, Settings, insert final new line. When enabled, insert a final new line at the end of the file when saving it. This thing I will just enable it because I work with C++. And as I am told, if I don't use this, I will have to manually add these lines every time I get error from the pedantic flag. Xcode user can use to recommend for kindly provided instructions. Instructions on how to configure. Uh, so the whole previous article and lesson was about the global build configurations. Next one was about the extensions, some which make the code uh, non-standard, non-standard, non-compliant, and how we can configure our way of building, way of compiling in such a way that solves the so we are introduced to these extensions and we said that this the best practice is not to use them, and we are told how to not use them, how to prevent. Related content. A reminder. These settings are applied on a per project basis. You need to set them every time you create a new project or create a template project with those settings once and use that to create new projects. So every time I want to create a new project, I want to create a new folder where I have a new file or a new program, I will need I will need to every time create this tasks on kind of thing. Uh, well, I have set up the auto final new line. Can we test it a little bit? For example, right here. Yes, I have pressed Ctrl S and I have been in the eighth line have been inserted. Like just like this. Well, okay, we have so in short, the meaning of this whole article is compiler extension exist. The best practice is not to use them because they make code non-standard compliant and showing the way how to stop using them in code blocks in VS if okay, so compiler extensions we are done. So should I somehow write down the flags I get for my GCC? Well, I have listed useful GCC flags, but I haven't actually listed any flags I have already passed, like GG, DB, etc. Well, I think we should stop. Uh, the 1 hour is okay. It is already 2 o'clock. I'm a little bit sleepy because I was doing stuff the whole day. I think we are going to continue fresh tomorrow. Continue freshly. We are going to write down and test the GCC flags we are encountering, to test the debug configuration build, the actual production configuration of build, and the pedantic errors flags. We'll check it out, uh, and then we'll come back and continue from this header, from this lesson. And for now, good night. Thank you for watching.